these devices strictly between themselves.
Oh hi. It's been 12 days, hasn't it? Well, as you can see, I'm at a new site. Site 13. So, yeah. There was another containment breach at that site. So, I'm at site 13 now. I'll show you to my room. Where I live. This is where I live basically. Kitchen, bathroom, dinner table, lounge room, my bedroom. So yeah, this is my place, basically. And this is the courtyard, as you can already tell. Press play.
Is known as the Old Man from Nowhere. As the nickname describes, SCP-1440 appears, at least at first glance, to be a man of unknown age and ethnicity. SCP-1440 is currently uncontained, but also is not considered hostile or actively evil by the SCP Foundation. Mostly he spends his days wandering the wilderness on his own. On the few instances he has crossed paths with the Foundation, when questioned about his name or where he was born, the Old Man will refuse to answer. It is not clear if this is because he does not want to divulge personal information about his origins, or if he simply doesn't have answers to those questions. Eyewitness accounts have described the Old Man from Nowhere as looking like an elderly gentleman, approximately 80 years old. However, descriptions of him have not changed at all in the 50 years since SCP-1440's existence was first brought to the Foundation's attention, with him always being described as looking the same way without changing. And there's only one conclusion we can land on from there.
Let's have a joint.
SCP-1440 does not age. So you may be wondering, is that it? Is SCP-1440 just an immortal wanderer, a rambling old man who is destined to keep on living long after all of us are dead? Not quite. In fact, that's barely the tip of the proverbial iceberg. Conquer the playing field. Unlock to the double XP with Mountain Dew. Each time that the Old Man from Nowhere comes into contact with a human population, or anything man-made at all, the rest of his anomalous nature is revealed. Not instantly, since he has to remain in contact with the population and stay close to them for a few days. Only then does this adverse effect on humanity and everything connected to it become more apparent. Should SCP-1440 dwell too close to people and man-made structures for any extended period of time, massively destructive events will begin to occur nearby. These events will continue to increase in size and scale, until everything in the immediate vicinity of the Old Man is dead and destroyed. Humans, buildings, vehicles, there is nothing left around him but total and utter devastation. All that survives is SCP-1440 himself, along with the clothes on his back, a sack he carries over one shoulder, a pack of playing cards, and the small glass that he keeps on his person at all times. Even though he causes disaster on a horrendous scale wherever he goes, SCP-1440 is not actively evil. The Old Man is fully aware of the effect he has when stationed too close to civilization for too long, but he doesn't create these destructive events by choice or out of malice for human beings. Death just seems to follow him, whether he wants it to or not. And it is for exactly this reason that he chooses a life of solitude, wandering from place to place with the intention of avoiding human contact for as long as he possibly can. Or at least, that is his intention. But SCP-1440 is unable to stay away for too long. The Old Man from Nowhere suffers from a compulsion to travel in a strange, highly complicated pattern of movement, and despite their best efforts, the researchers of the SCP Foundation have been, thus far, unable to properly analyze this pattern. SCP-1440 literally cannot stop himself. He can't even provide any useful information about why he feels so compelled to travel in such a way. Most likely because he is not even aware of it happening. But whatever the reason may be, the old man from nowhere will inevitably travel in his unpredictable patterns that always lead him towards civilization, where he will come into contact with people and ultimately cause their doom. It is due to his unintentional yet highly destructive capabilities that SCP-1440 remains uncontained by the SCP Foundation to this day. All previous attempts to contain him have resulted in catastrophic losses for the Foundation, both in resources and lives of personnel. Even so, the old man is far from hostile and shows no contempt towards human beings. He will even willingly and without resistance allow himself to be captured and subdued whenever the Foundation have attempted to contain him, though he seems to know that it's only a matter of time before everything around him is destroyed and he's forced to embark on his wandering path once again. SCP-1440 was first brought to the attention of the SCP Foundation over 50 years ago. During a commute to work, one of the Foundation's research staff was approached by an old man who appeared to be in his 80s and was asking for her help. When she asked what he needed help with, the man told her that he hoped that the SCP Foundation would be able to destroy him. Not only had he somehow learned the identity of this Foundation doctor and tracked her down, but SCP-1440 had sought out the Foundation so that they could bring an end to his immortal existence permanently. The Foundation had the old man from nowhere brought in for questioning at one of their secret facilities. A grave mistake. Before they could even attempt to theorize a way to terminate SCP-1440 as he requested, the SCP Foundation site was completely obliterated. Over 100 personnel were killed, and the loss of the facility also destroyed 6 safe and Euclid-class SCP objects. Ever since then, any attempt to contain the old man from nowhere has ended in much the same way, with hundreds dead and millions of dollars worth of property destruction. Until they have a surefire way of keeping SCP-1440 and his destructive power contained, their best option is to focus on observing him from a safe distance, and trying to predict his travel pattern to steer him away from civilians. But still, the Foundation has persevered with capturing SCP-1440, even if only for brief periods of time. During this time, they have conducted numerous interviews, each time learning more and more about the aloof, elusive immortal and his various exploits over the centuries. Few records of these interviews have managed to survive the destructive power of the old man from nowhere's anomalous abilities. However, there exists one transcript, an interview from the Foundation's fourth attempt to contain SCP-1440 that was logged and saved to a remote server off-site. Before the interview had begun, SCP-1440's arrival to the area had already started to cause adverse effects on the Foundation staff. A number of personnel had reported experiencing severe headaches and nausea. Over the 2 days that followed, many of the site's water purification filters were found to be malfunctioning. Shortly after, a hangar at the site collapsed, killing several Foundation airmen. Additionally, a member of research personnel was found to have suffered a total collapse of both kidneys and lungs simultaneously, all despite having been in perfect physical health. SCP-1440, complying with the Foundation as he had before, sat down with the doctor to commence the interview. The old man was quick to praise the SCP Foundation for their continued efforts to capture and contain him, even though the previous 3 times had all ended catastrophically. He stated that he now knew the Foundation could not help him bring an end to his immortality, and that it was in their best interests to release him. SCP-1440 then warned the doctor that the first brother was standing behind them. During previous interviews, the old man from nowhere had made similar allusions to a group of brothers, 3 of them to be precise. This time he expanded a little on who these brothers were.
3, different, but one and the same. All cruel, all vengeful, all capable of holding a grudge for a long time. They are the cause of my misfortune, and therefore the cause of yours.
It was at that moment that SCP-1440 seemed to notice something standing behind the doctor interviewing him, and warned that the second brother had now joined the first. He claimed that time was running out, and that the Foundation needed to release him for their own safety before it was too late. The doctor politely refused, and inquired about the third brother. SCP-1440 seemed to describe an elusive figure who never appeared to him, but the old man from nowhere seemed to imply that one glimpse of this mysterious third brother would set him free. Perhaps he meant by curing his tortured immortality, or at least making it safe for SCP-1440 to be around people without causing their destruction.
The third never appears. In that he is crueler than both his brothers, for he knows his appearance is the only thing that will set me free. I have spent time untold searching for him, trying to return his prize and those I won from his brothers, but to no avail.
SCP-1440 remarked that the second brother had his hands on the doctor's shoulders, taking that as an omen of doom and the doctor's imminent death. The old man offered one final warning.
Should you choose to challenge death to a game of cards for your life, there is one thing you must never do: win.
At that precise moment, the nuclear device kept on site as a failsafe was activated, bypassing all security protocols and failsafes. The entire Foundation facility was destroyed, killing every single member of personnel in a quick
Dumbass
instant of atomic
humans.
obliteration. A week later, a figure was spotted over 3,000 kilometers away from the blast site. An old man who had suffered no apparent damage from the explosion or the fallout. It seems though his vague allusion to three brothers and card games that SCP-1440 gained his immortality from death itself, or rather a group of entities known as the Brothers' Death, although they have been referred to as countless names by cultures past and present across the world. Old Gods, the All-Death, Yulu, Yama, Siddhigarba. These three brothers are a lot more than just a trio of Grim Reapers collecting the souls of the dead. They are in fact responsible for the creation of everything that exists as we know it, governing all of reality and deciding when each part of it must come to its unavoidable end. It would appear that, by challenging the brothers' death to a card game, SCP-1440 was cursed with his eternal lifespan, while also causing the deaths of thousands without choice or consent. The items that the old man carries are even the prizes of the brothers' death, won during the same card game. While limited in their uses, they are extremely powerful, and can reduce the brothers' influence on the mortal coil. The glass cup holds the elixir of life, a single drop capable of curing the sickest men and saving them from the grip of death. The playing cards the old man keeps are the cards of fate, holding the power to challenge death's authority and alter fate, preventing wars, deaths, and calamities. Finally, the sack of all death, able to carry anything within it, including unspeakable catastrophes and even death itself. As human populations spread further into previously uninhabited areas, it's becoming harder for SCP-1440 to avoid contact with people. Drawn to them by his unstoppable compulsion, he continues to live out century after century spent causing destruction and death wherever he wanders to. Just pray that the old man never finds his way to your town. Now go check out SCP-1879 Indoor Salesman and SCP-2852 Sadistic Madman Party Crasher Cousin Johnny for more straight.
It's the most triangle time of the year. With the green...
What is your favorite word? Think about it for a moment. Think real hard. Write it down in the comments, post it for everyone else to see. How many letters does it have? How many syllables? Say it aloud. How does it sound? How does it feel on your tongue? Really think about it. Now make sure you keep that word in mind. It's important, and we'll come back to it later. For now, it's time to talk about SCP-3449. Look, there's really nothing any special about this one. It wasn't even important enough to be mentioned with the other info hazards. It's not an evil talking toaster, that's for sure. SCP-3449 appears to just be a standard spiral notebook. Notebook? It's supposed to be notebook, right? Anyway, it's just a standard spiral notebook with a dark blue cover. It's safe class, and it's stored in the standard containment locker in Site-19. There aren't any other containment requires, but testing is currently underway to determine, I think it's meant to be determine long-term containment requirements.
This is a mess.
Anyway, this item and its anomalous power is actually considered so inconsequential that researchers have explored the possibility of putting it on the anomalous items log, a place where items too useless to warrant a full file ends up. Jeez, how do you misspell up that badly? It's 2 letters. Well, it's supposed to be 2 letters. How did you work Z into that? They aren't even close to each other in keyboard. Anyway, the notebook is spelled. Full file ends up. Jeez, how do you misspell up that badly? It's 2 letters. 19. There aren't any other containment requires, but testing is currently underway to determine. I think it's meant to be book. It's containment locker in. How does it feel on your tongue? Really, really think about it. Now make sure you keep that word in mind. It's important, and we'll come back to it later. For now, it's time to talk about SCP-3449. Look, there's really nothing any special about this one. It wasn't even important enough to be mentioned with the other info hazards. It's not an evil talking toaster, that's for sure. SCP-3449 appears to just be a standard spiral notebook. Notebook? It's supposed to be notebook, right? Anyway, it's just a standard spiral notebook with a dark blue cover. It's safe class, and it's stored in the standard containment locker in Site-19. There aren't any other containment requires, but testing is currently underway to determine, I think it's meant to be determine long-term containment requirements.
This is a mess.
Anyway, this item and its anomalous power is actually considered so inconsequential that researchers have explored the possibility of putting it on the anomalous items log, a place where items too useless to warrant a full file ends up. Jeez, how do you misspell up that badly? It's 2 letters. Well, it's supposed to be 2 letters. How did you work Z into that? They aren't even close to each other in keyboard.
Man.
Anyway, the notebook contains mostly blank pages. Some are torn, and only 6 contain actual writing. But due to the formatting of the writing, the text, consisting mainly of diary entries...
Let's head to bed, I guess. In the morning. Press play.
It's almost unreadable. This is due to syntaxical errors, random capitalization, and rampant misspellings. Great, you misspelled misspellings. How cute. Apparently, all attempts to correct these misspellings fail, or even lead to additional misspellings. This anomalous effect extends to anyone attempting to write. Yep, that was spelled R-I-G-H-T. Anyone attempting to write about SCP-3449. Including the script for this video, apparently. There are no further notable anomalous properties. Tests are ongoing, though those with any inquiries about testing SCP-3449 should contact lead researcher Nicolo Gurdnell. The notebook, which was misspelled even worse this time, impressive, was first recovered by MTF Epsilon 6, also known as the Village Idiots, after a series of info-hazardous and cognito-hazardous phenomenon were discovered in the Pittsburgh Metrode area. The source seemed to be a storage unit filled with anomalous items, and SCP-3449 was among us. I think that's meant to be among them. The storage unit was registered to a man by the name of Edward Salisbury, currently designated as Porpoise of Interest 4335. That's the end of that. Thanks for watching the video, folks. Now go check out... Oh, wait, there's more. Phenomenal. Let's keep going. Apparently, that version of the file was an older one. Let's check the next one and see if that's any more useful. Oh my. It appears that the updates here are actually quite extensive. Okay, let's give this another try. SCP-3449 is a Euclid-class SPC kept in the humanid containment cells of Site-19. Items affected by it are kept in standard storage lockers for safe-class anomalous objects at the same site. The primary reason for this shift is that SCP-3449 has changed its object of designation. It is no longer the spiral notebook. It is now a 34-year-old Caucasian man known as Edward Salisbury. formerly known as Person of Interest 4335. He is believed to be the creator of the Notebook, as well as other objects found in the storage looker in Pittsburgh. Foundation personnel are now trying to locate and contain any other objects created by Mr. Salzberg, though success has been limited on this front. That was cute. SCP-3449's analogous abilities manifest onto both Edward himself and all the objects created by him. Reading about him or any of these objects will result in syntactical errors, arbitrary capitalizations, and rampart impsmalings. Attempts to revise or correct the writing will either fail to remove the errors or create new errors. It appears that the anomalous effects of SCP-3449 proper are more severe than that of the ones caused by his anomalous objects.
We are specialty coffee roasters, and even though roasting is a very physical process, Dropbox has become an essential tool for our business.
MTF Epsilon 6, also known as the Village Idiots, apprehended SCP-3449 in his apartment just outside of Pittsburgh. He appeared to be in an advanced state of disorientation and dehydration. Records collected by the Mobile Task Force found that Mr. Selberg had not left his apartment in over 10 days, which would account for his dire health conditions. Salzberg did not communicate with members of the Mobile Task Force, but did not reset arrest and subsequent containment either. Okay, these spellings are rough, but I'm going to try and power through. I am a professional, and we're almost there. The following is the full list of items obtained from SCP-3449's storage car that also exhibit his anomalous effects. The notebook, as already discussed, the pages are either blank, torn, or illegible. Salzberg's computer. Files saved on this device include spreadsheets dealing personal finances, ideals for products, and an unfinished horror novel that is almost unwritable due to the poor quality of its writing. Grocery list. Had only 2 written items. Looter was spelled with only 1 T, and medication, which was spelled medication, a planner. Last entry was dated 2 weeks before containment, believed to contain reminders to perform various chores. However, a mixture of poor handwriting and word choice allows for other interpretations. And finally, Mr. Salzberg's cell phone. Foundation researchers were also able to collect the call logs in hopes of further tracking Salzberg's pre-containment activities. The last 3 calls, which were all made on the same day 2 weeks before containment, dialed different numbers, only one of which was in use. The Foundation made contact with the receiver of said call, who had no knowledge of SCP-3449, and claimed that they did not answer the call. Lead researcher Niccolo Gerdinel conducted the first interview with SCP-3449 shortly after his capture. When he entered the interview chamber, he found that SCP Foundation, before their current numbering system was introduced. Let's get one thing clear. As much as it is fun to go through the various articles on the SCP of harmless life, everything you had ever seen or known was just a... Which of the various SCP-001s are we talking about? Anyone looking for the earliest SCP will quickly discover that there are many different entities and anomalies that share that number. There are a few in-universe reasons for this. One is that all these anomalies were discovered in the earliest days of the SCP Foundation, before their current numbering system was introduced. Then there's the other theories. For example, some have speculated that the existence of many different SCP-001s is an intentional misdirection by the Foundation, their way of keeping the nature of the first true SCP a closely guarded secret. Regardless of what the reason is, the SCP-001 we're looking at today is also known as the database. Any and all information about the database is kept secret from the entire SCP Foundation apart from the Overseer Council. And why is it such a secret? Well, that's because SCP-001 contains details of the very nature of the Foundation itself, including its creation. But we don't mean when and how the organization was founded, or its history. We mean how it was created, and by whom, in our reality. Confused? Well, allow us to explain it. At first, the file for SCP-001 describes a group of humanoid entities that have the ability to influence reality. All sounds like pretty standard bread and butter stuff for the SCP Foundation, right? Wrong. These entities are, in fact, the authors of the SCP Wiki themselves, as in the people in the real world. The reality of the SCP Foundation is constantly changed by these writers, written and rewritten whenever someone edits an article on the SCP Wiki. That's all fine and harmless for us, but the Wiki author's impact on their world is cause of grave concern for the Foundation. As we mentioned at the start, we all know that the SCP Foundation can be fun to study the lore and the nuances of the different SCPs or even animated videos dedicated to explaining them. It can even inspire and fuel our own written endeavors. But at the end of the day, when all is said and done, we all know that the SCP Foundation is purely fictional. What we
It's
don't
not as real.
realize is that the Foundation knows it too.
I am
Containing
there,
certain pieces of information from
basically.
within their own archive.
Sure, in your
The database
universe,
contains
but in my
everything the
universe,
Foundation knows
it's
about
real.
our real world. This includes
What the
everything
fuck?
about the real authors of the SCP Wiki. And you thought Deadpool was meta. You see, because the SCP Wiki has articles from numerous different creative writers, chances are the details of every new article might not always line up with every previous one. For a long time, there has been much discussion amongst devoted SCP fans regarding the canon of the website. Now, we don't mean a big gun that launches metal balls. When we say canon, we mean all of the events and stories that are considered to be an official part of the ongoing story of the SCP Foundation. Still with us so far? Because there are so many writers and articles on the wiki, the canon of the SCP archive is a bit inconsistent, to say the least. And that's fine for us, because we know none of it is real. It doesn't have to all line up, just as long as a good story is being told. But these inconsistencies, all the little cracks of discrepancy and disparity, are what made the Foundation themselves realize that they are truly living in a fiction. In other words, SCP-001 is the SCP Foundation's window through what we would experience as the fourth wall. The fourth wall is the metaphorical barrier that separates what we know to be real from what we know to be purely fiction. In other words, it's the line between the audience and the fiction that they are watching, the edge of the stage or the glass of the television screen. And the SCP Foundation is staring through that fourth wall, looking out at you and me. That's right. It isn't just the authors that the Foundation are aware of. It's all of us. According to their own researchers, the Foundation has determined that we, the audience, and the writers, exist in something known as the Alpha Layer. What on earth is an Alpha Layer? Well, imagine our reality. The world and the universe as we know it is a slice of bread. It's a strange analogy, we know, but stick with us. Now picture the fictional world of the SCP Foundation as another slice of bread underneath ours. In between the two can be whatever you like. But the point isn't that the world is a sandwich. The point is that we exist on a layer of reality above that of the SCP Wiki. And the filling is just what keeps reality and fiction separate. So as we mentioned, the Foundation is aware of any writers and readers of the SCP Wiki. And this does include you. But the wiki authors are the primary focus of the database. After all, it's the writers who are responsible for creating the fictional world that the SCP Foundation exists in. Anything that forms a part of the narrative of that world, every article, every tale, every new SCP that gets published, even parts of the wiki that get taken down or rewritten, all have an impact on the Foundation's universe. When the authors link their new SCPs to pre-existing ones, or create connections to a group of interests like the Church of the Broken God or the Global Occult Coalition, their writing ends up making even more of a substantial development to the overall narrative. And all of it ends up in the database. The readers of the SCP Wiki, on the other hand, are a smaller part of SCP-001, mainly because they do not write or publish the content found on the website itself. Anything that is not specifically set in stone by a wiki author can be interpreted in various ways by a reader. A reader's interpretation is a powerful concept, and should not be underestimated. Interpretation is the difference between reading Animal Farm as a story about a group of animals rebelling against their human farmer, and understanding it as a satirical and political allegory for the events leading up to the Russian Revolution. So what does interpretation have to do with SCP-001? at is that any unwritten detail or anything that isn't explicitly stated by a wiki author can be changed by a reader's own imagination. This can be anything, from the appearance or personality of an SCP or character, to a detail about the world of the Foundation. And in the same vein, if something in one SCP article contradicts something written in another, the reader is free to choose which of them they accept as part of the universe's true canon. Each reader of the SCP Wiki has their own understanding of the material written there, and inevitably comprehends their own version of the events within. And this is something that the SCP Foundation, even in their world of fiction, is aware of. Or more specifically, the O5 Council is aware of. You see, the secretive overseers are the only ones with any true knowledge of SCP-001. Only they can access the database. Only they know the truth. The fact that they exist in this fictional capacity is something the Overseer Council hopes to hide from the rest of the Foundation's personnel. In an effort to keep the rest of their staff from asking too many questions, the Council has told them that there is currently no way in existence that they could possibly contain SCP-001. But to reassure personnel, the O5s have also stated that this does not pose any risk, nor would it lead to the total and utter destruction of their observable fictional universe. Instead, the Council aims to focus on what they call concept, and should not be underestimated.
Which have a drawing for
Reading
today.
Animal Farm as a story about a group of animals rebelling against their human farmer, and understanding it as a satirical and political allegory for the events leading up to the Russian Revolution. So what does interpretation have to do with SCP-001? The point we are getting at is that any unwritten detail or anything that isn't explicitly stated by a wiki author can be changed by a reader's own imagination. This can be anything, from the appearance or personality of an SCP or character, to a detail about the world of the Foundation. And in the same vein, if something in one SCP article contradicts something written in another, the reader is free to choose which of them they accept as part of the universe's true canon. Each reader of the SCP Wiki has their own understanding of the material written there, and inevitably comprehends their own version of the events within. And this is something that the SCP Foundation, even in their world of fiction, is aware of. Or more specifically, the O5 Council is aware of. You see, the secretive overseers are the only ones with any true knowledge of SCP-001. Only they can access the database. Only they know the truth. The fact that they exist in this fictional capacity is something the Overseer Council hopes to hide from the rest of the Foundation's personnel. In an effort to keep the rest of their staff from asking too many questions, the Council has told them that there is currently no way in existence that they could possibly contain SCP-001. But to reassure personnel, the O5s have also stated that this does not pose any risk, nor would it lead to the total and utter destruction of their observable fictional universe. Instead, the Council aims to focus on what they can control, by containing any and all information about SCP-001. Nothing about the database, or the truth that it contains, is to ever leave O5 Command under any circumstances whatsoever. All of the information about SCP-001, or what it contains, is kept in an encrypted, highly classified form at an unknown location. The key needed to decrypt this data is a passcode split into 3 parts. This key is then memorized by members of the O5 Council, each memorizing a different portion of the passcode. It can only be accessed if every member of the Council unanimously agrees that it is absolutely necessary. And even when they do decrypt the information about SCP-001, it remains for the eyes of O5 Command, and strictly their eyes only. Any member of the SCP Foundation caught leaking data about SCP-001 is to be contained by any means necessary. This also includes if a member of personnel attempts to get this classified information out via espionage, psychic leakage, or other devious methods. Foundation researchers are even banned from conducting any of their own investigations into the nature of SCP-001, or the data it contains. If a lower-level staff member was somehow to find out the truth, that the entire Foundation is just a fiction, then that person would be at the mercy of the most senior figure on the O5 Council. It would be up to that senior figure to decide their fate, Anyone with high enough clearance or status within the Foundation who found out about SCP-001 would alternatively be given a Class A amnestic. These are memory-altering drugs that the SCP Foundation uses to keep information about anomalies a secret, apparently even from its own staff. Still, having your mind wiped has got to be better than being killed or contained, just for realizing you're a fictional character on an online wiki. The O5 Council has plans in mind for us, and for the SCP Wiki writers responsible for creating them. The SCP Wiki entry on the database closes with a proposal, a way that the O5 Council can reach out of their fiction directly to the Wiki's authors in the real world. From there, their goal is simple. Through memetic kill agents, the SCP Foundation will put the Wiki authors to sleep and then kill them. Sounds pretty far-fetched, doesn't it? After all, when was the last time something fictional killed someone in our real world? Even more bizarre, what if this kill agent really exists? The O5 Council must have known for a while that their world is fictional, so they've had plenty of time to develop a kill agent. Reaching us and the SCP Wiki authors in the real world. Worse still, what if this kill agent is already out there somewhere, lurking on the SCP archive, just waiting for you to find it? And if you read it, how would it kill you? If you don't want to know, then that's your choice to make. But if curiosity is getting the better of you, then remember this. Beware SCP-5999. To continue the story...
It's time to start fresh with D-Smile. Rethink your routine.
There's a quote that says, "The beautiful thing about learning is nobody can take smooth." When asked if
Noah
she
joined.
exhibited any kind of aggression or hostility, she said that it was completely still. It was just standing there. After a few minutes, though, the creature seemed to lose interest and began staring at the wall. The researchers were happy to learn more about the creature's physicality, but they still weren't confident that it wasn't just an illusion created by the glasses. They needed to engineer an interaction. For the next experiment, they decided to alter the particulars. A fractal blue and red image, in a similar style to the stereoscopic Ferris wheel from the book Andrea had purchased, was fixed to one wall. Against the opposite wall, they placed a bucket containing 10 standard tennis balls. This time, the D-Class, a convicted murderer and arsonist, was told he was helping to test a new 3D augmented reality project. The entities he would see, as far as he knew, were little more than digital projections. Though when he actually wore SCP-178 and saw them, he commented that whoever designed them must be crazy. The researchers instructed the D-Class to pick up a tennis ball and throw it at one of the entities. The second he did so, deep lacerations began appearing all over his body. The onslaught was brutal and quick, and the D-Class was dead soon after that. This confirmed to the researchers that the creatures did seem to have some level of tangible presence, and they could be extremely violent if provoked. Next, they wished the companion had yet to encounter another living soul. Thick dark clouds hung in the sky above them, and Leslie soon found it hard to remember what the sun looked like. She feared that she might even forget Merle's face. "We're close," she said. "Just a few more miles and then we will arrive." SCP-049 finished her sentence. "Tell me, Doctor, why did you come all this way with me?" Leslie the mosquito asked. "You could have left when we got out, gone on your own way." In response, he gave one simple sentence.
We have Noah joined.
"Simply because I wanted to." Finally, the intrepid pair arrived at a house once belonging to Merle. It was abandoned, ramshackle, in a total state of disrepair. Decades had passed since anyone had set foot in the place. The living room that had once been so familiar to Leslie had now been transformed into a barren, empty space. The sight of it made her so distraught with sadness that she would have been sick, if mosquitoes could be sick. Merle, whoever he was, or had been, was now nowhere to be found. One of Leslie's cybernetic enhancements was an internal positioning system, giving her all sorts of data and readouts, including a clock. It told her just how long she'd been away for. "I've been dead for 200 years? The mosquito cried in the palm of the doctor's hand. Then Merle is dead. Everyone is dead." She kept repeating it to herself over and over, as if she was trying to convince herself of what had happened. Eventually, the words lost all meaning. As he held Leslie in his hands, perhaps the plague doctor felt sorry for the mosquito. After all, the Plague Doctor had always had a respectful, polite personality despite his frightening exterior. He had always believed that he'd acted in service of the greater good, trying to cure the world of pestilence, to bring the end of disease. He only ever killed because, to him, it was in his victim's best interest for him to perform his procedures. To his captors at the SCP Foundation, the Doctor had been courteous and cooperative, and he acted the same towards his fellow SCPs. Not just Leslie, but even the sort of anomalies with nothing but hatred in their hearts. The Doctor saw them as just further victims of the pestilence, in need of curing. SCP-049 sat in silence for a while with his mosquito friend, letting her mourn the loss of Merle and everything she had ever known. "Where will you go now?" he asked. Still in tears, barely able to speak through her sobs, Leslie decided that she wanted to stay where she was. The insect wanted to live where Merle had lived, in a desperate attempt to recapture the world that she once knew. Sitting in the Plague Doctor's gloved hands, still sobbing even though she had run out of tears, Leslie said, Any minute Merle will come through the door." The Plague Doctor held his tiny companion where she was, while she grieved. "Then I will wait for him," he told her. "Here, with you. Now go check out SCP-049, the Plague Doctor captured, and SCP-049, what actually is the pestilence? The Plague Doctor questions and theories. For more on this enigmatic medicine man.